Now, welcome everybody. This is a new live stream with Dr. Mukesh Edavalat. Uh, the topic is determinants of optimal immune response, an Ayurvedic perspective. And I will give you a very short introduction to our guest today. Who is a very high profile Ayurvedic doctor. So Dr. Mukesh Edavalat is currently working as assistant professor, Department of Roganidana, Clinical Medicine, Ayurveda College, Kottakkal in Kerala in India. With a master's degree in Ayurveda from the University of Kannur, he has served as a medical officer for 5 years in the Department of Indian Systems of Medicine, Government of Kerala, before taking up his current tenure as an educator. An active clinician and clinical educator, Dr. Mukesh has, to his credit, several published papers in national and international journals. Also, he has delivered talks in various international seminars in India and abroad. His research interests include studies on the role of gut dysfunction in various pain pathologies and standardization of disease diagnosis in the field of Ayurvedic clinical practice. He is a regular faculty in various Ayurvedic training programs, research workshops, and also an editorial member in leading scientific journals. He is also the director of Kottakkal Ayurveda School of Excellence, which offers certificate programs aimed at providing continued innovative and functional learning for Ayurvedic practitioners. Now, a great welcome to you, sir. And from here on, we will be just listening to your presentation. So please go on.
Thank you, Mr. Vissel. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers, especially Dr. Vinayak Nair and Dr. Ram Manohar sir, for inviting me for delivering a talk in this platform. So without wasting much time, let me go into my topic. So my topic is determinants of optimal immune response, an Ayurvedic viewpoint or an Ayurvedic perspective. So myself, I'm Dr. Mukesh E, as introduced by Mr. Vissel. So these are the contents of my presentation. So I will be talking about introduction to an optimal immune response and a brief introduction to the Ayurveda and its basic principles. And later on to the determinants of the immune response, Ayurvedic remedies for immune dysfunction, and also a brief about the Kottakkal brand of Ayurveda where I work. So what's an optimal immune response? So whenever we speak about immunity, recently we all know that this immunity has been the talk of the town because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know that most of the complications that arose from this COVID pandemic came because of a aberrant immune response that happened as a part of the pathology. So there were a lot of studies going on already in autoimmunity and all those immunodeficiency disorders. But suddenly when this pandemic came, then people started dwelling more into the pathogenesis of this aberrant immune response. So whenever we speak about optimal immune response, so we need to understand that usually there should be a balance in the immune response. So whenever there is an infection or any other challenge from outside, our immune system has to behave in an optimal way so that it doesn't harm the host and it has to take care of the infective organism. So whenever there is an excessive immune response, then the body may go into something called as an allergic response or an autoimmune mechanism. And whenever there is a decreased response, then then the body is open for infections as well as malignancies. And there can be some exceptions as well, because in case of infections also, as in COVID-19, there can be an aberrant excessive immune response, just like the cytokine storm that we have seen in the COVID pandemic. So that is where the term immune tolerance will also come into play, because the body also has, the immune cells also have to identify what is self and differentiate it from something that is non-self. And it has to keep the immunity in check regarding the destruction that is caused to the self tissue. So this is where the term, this optimal immune response, will come into play. And secondly, when we speak about optimal immune response, the another thing that we have to keep in mind is that this optimal immune response is something that is context specific rather than a generic term. So that a maximum immune response is not necessarily something that is optimal. Best example is COVID-19, because we know that initially the immunity may be slightly suppressed because of the viral mechanisms, and later on what happens is our humoral immunity will take charge, and it will have an over response or an excessive response, leading to this cytokine storm and the tissue damage, which ultimately ends up in this lung damage or other end organ damages. So a maximum immune response doesn't imply that it's an optimal one. That is the one thing that we have to keep in mind. And second thing is that the nature of an optimal immune response, that depends upon the specific circumstances in which the body is exposed to, or the infection status. And to understand this optimality, we have to decode the different immune mechanisms in play in health as well as in disease. So this is what we are going to do, a small attempt regarding what is the Ayurvedic viewpoint on this optimal immune response. What are the factors that we consider based on the Ayurvedic basic principles that govern the immune response in such a scenario. So before going into the topic as such, I would like to give a brief introduction about what Ayurveda stands for and what are the basic principles regarding Ayurveda, because I know that a lot of listeners will not be initiated regarding what Ayurveda is. So Ayurveda is a healthcare system which had its origin in ancient India, and in India currently it is among one of the mainstream healthcare systems that is in practice. Even we have government-run medical colleges and hospitals and clinics, and even in the periphery we have several health mechanisms which deliver this Ayurvedic care to the public. And the key characteristics of this system of medicine is that it's rather than a simple medical system, it's a science of life. It teaches us how to lead a healthy life. So it has, apart from the medicines or the treatment procedures, it has everything in it explained regarding how we can lead a peaceful and healthy life. So it's a science of life rather than a simple medical system. And it also advocates for positive health. So as this modern medicine until recently, the modern medicine itself has vouched for identifying disorders and their management. Now there is a slow shift going on towards the positive health. But since ancient times, Ayurveda has stood for positive health, so that the first aim of Ayurveda itself is to prevent occurrence of diseases, and the second aim is to treat diseases that has already manifested. So Ayurveda advocates for something called as a positive health. And the next unique feature of Ayurveda is that it has a holistic picture or a holistic approach towards health, so that Ayurveda sees body as a whole. So the connection between the mind, body, and the spirit, Ayurveda considered it as the wholesome mechanism that is needed for health. And also it has a personalized approach. I think we will be familiar with the preventive personalized medicine that is being put forward by the modern medicine recently. But Ayurveda has always stood for this personalized approach towards health and disease, so that if 10 individuals come with a similar diagnosis, the Ayurvedic approach will be different, so that it will be different in all these 10 individuals, because it is having a highly personalized approach, so that the medications and other therapeutic approach will be different for all these individuals, even though they have a same disease. And Ayurveda employs, most of the time, it employs natural remedies, herbs and minerals that are found, and they purify that, and we make use of as medications. And also Ayurveda promotes harmony with nature. So that Ayurveda expounds for living in harmony with our nature. So these are some of the unique features of Ayurveda. And next, going on to the basic principles, some of the fundamental principles, so that if I explain this, I can explain the immune mechanisms and the determinants in a more elaborate way. So the basic tenet lies in the Panchamahabhuta theory. So that Ayurveda says that whatever is there in the universe, that is present in the body as well. So this is something called as the Loga Purusha Siddhanta. Loga means the universe and Purusha means the individual. So Ayurveda sees human being as a part of the universe. So whatever is present in the universe, that is present in the body as well. So the body is always in interaction with the surroundings, and whatever change that happens in the universe or in surroundings, that will always reflect on the human body as health or as a disease. So that is why the body and the universe is made up of 5 basic elements, that is Prithvi, that is earth, Jala, that is water, Agni or fire, Vayu or air, and Akasha or space. So the universe is made up of different permutations and combinations of these 5 elements, and the body and its subunits like cells and all those things are even made up of different permutations and combinations of these Panchamahabhutas. So that is why, as I told earlier, Ayurveda always looks at this harmony between the universe and the human body as a whole. And next comes the basic, that means the most important theory in Ayurveda, that is the Tridosha theory. So Ayurveda says that the body is made up of 3 important functional elements, that is Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And this Vata, Pitta, and Kapha are again made up of different permutations and combination of the Panchamahabhuta that I told earlier. So all these Panchamahabhutas are present in different permutations and combinations in these 3 doshas. And these 3 doshas form the functional, control units of the body. You can just take it as, if you take a motor car, you have accelerator, clutch, and brake, the 3 mechanisms is controlled or governed by these 3 doshas. So Vada we can consider as an accelerator, Pitta we can consider as a clutch because it mediates all those things, and Kapha as a brake. So Kapha forms all the functional elements in the body. Pitta governs all these metabolic functions and even some higher cognitive functions in the body. And Vada controls everything. So it is the initiator, it is the regulator. So Vada is something like an accelerator in a car, so that it controls everything. And each dosha can be identified by a particular sets of signs and symptoms and mental attributes in their normalcy as well as abnormalcy. So this Tridosha theory is very unique, so that it equips Ayurveda even to tackle emerging diseases. So a lot of people will ask us, Ayurveda is an ancient science, then how come Ayurveda can address all these emerging diseases? So this theory is very stable over time, so that even in the emerging diseases we can apply this theory, because the pharmacopoeia of Ayurveda is expounded based on the Tridosha theory. So the medicines are also elaborated based on their actions on these 3 doshas. So by identifying the symptomatology in the patient, we can identify the predominant dosha that is present at that point of time, and we can identify the medicines accordingly, and we can treat the disease. So that is why this Tridosha theory is one of the important theory that guides Ayurvedic approach to health and disease. And apart from the 3 dosha, the body is made up of 7 dhatu or elements or structural units that includes rasa, rakta, mamsa, meda, asti, majja, and shukra. So these are structural as well as functional units. I am not going too deep because of the lack of time. And even there are 3 malas or excretory products in terms of sweda, which can be roughly compared to sweat, mutra, urine, and purisha, that is a stool or feces. And all this functioning of the 7 dhadus and malas are in turn controlled by these 3 doshas, Vada, Pitta, and Kapha. And if you speak about mathematics, we can say that the 100% we can split into 33.333, something like that. So 33.33 will be Vada, 33.33 will be Pitta, and 33.33 will be Kapha in terms of health. And whenever there is an imbalance, for example, if Vada became 50, then we say that it's a diseased state, and we have to give some treatment, medicines, or dietary measures to bring back this balance. So that is the basic tenet of Ayurveda. I hope this concept is clear, the Pancha Mahabodha, the Tridosha, and all the functional elements in the body. And coming back to our topic of discussion, that is immunity. So when we speak about the concept of immunity in Ayurveda, there are four important terms that will come into play. That is Bala, Ojas, Vyadhikshamatva, and Pratyaniga. You might be wondering that I'm using a lot of Sanskrit terminologies. And why I am using that is because all these Ayurvedic theories are expounded in form of Sanskrit textbooks, especially three main textbooks called as Brihatrayis, the Charaka Samhita, Susruta Samhita, and Ashtanga Hridaya. So these texts form the what you call the basic core of Ayurvedic principles, and these terminologies are extracted from those textbooks. So the term Bala, Ojas, Vyadhikshamatva, and Pratyaniga. So these terms represent the concept of immunity at different contexts, which are explained in the great textbooks of Ayurveda. So Vyadhikshamatva is nothing but it can be decoded into two main concepts. That is, one thing is that Vyadhikshamatva is those principles or those factors that prevent manifestation of disease in a healthy body. So resist the manifestation of disease in an already healthy body. And the second point is that it helps us in combating already manifested diseases, to fight already manifested diseases. So throughout these presentations, I have given some important references in these slides. So those people who have exposed themselves to Ayurvedic textbooks, they can go through these references. That is why I have put. So this is from Charaka Samhita, Sutrasthana, or the chapter, the section of Sutrasthana, and the chapter number and the slogan number. So those who are interested, they can go through that later on. So Vyadhikshamata is nothing but the ability of the body to resist manifestation of a disease and also to combat already manifested disease. Next, we go on to the main topic. What are the determinants of this immune response as per Ayurveda? So these determinants can be classified into mainly two, that is intrinsic factors and extrinsic factors. So intrinsic factors are something they are intrinsic to the human body, and extrinsic are those outside the human body, like the habitat in which the individual lives, and also the seasonal variations that is being present. So intrinsic include bala or endurance of the body, or you can call it the stamina of the body, etc. And this bala itself is again classified into three. That is sahaja. That means that is something that we are born with. So that is something called as the prakriti that we are going to discuss in detail later on. So this is genetically determined. This sahaja factor is something that is genetically determined. And next is kalaja, that is age related. So we know that this immunity can vary between the different age groups. So that there is a particular type of immunity in the infants, and there is some term known as immunosenescence, so that the immunity may behave in a different form when we age. So that is kalaja. And next is yuktikrita. That means we modulate our body. So we modulate the immunity with the help of diet, our lifestyles, or even therapeutic. In forms of, in Ayurveda we call it as rasayana. So this the concept of rasayana is very unique to Ayurveda, where we give medications and lifestyle to improve the health. So it's also known as rejuvenation techniques, and this is very unique to Ayurveda. And apart from Bala, then we have this dosha balance. As I told earlier, the three doshas, they always should be in a balanced state for a person to be healthy. So that dosha balance is another determinant for the immune response. Then there is dhatu sara, or the essence of the seven dhadus. So if all the dhadus are in their excellent state, then that essence is called as ojas. And this ojas is an important determinant for our immune response. Then there is this concept of Agni. So the concept of Agni means, literally Agni means fire. But in Ayurveda, this term represents the metabolic activity and all those factors that regulate metabolic activity in the body. So an optimal metabolic state is very important for an optimal immune response. So that is where the concept of Agni will come into play. And then the very important thing, that is Sattva Bala, or the mental state of the individual. So the mental state is very important for an optimal function of immunity. So these are the intrinsic factors that decide how an immune system should respond or will respond whenever there is a challenge, a pathogen challenge in our body. The extrinsic factor, as I told, includes two. That is the desha and the kala. Desha is nothing but the habitat in which the individual lives, and the kala or the seasonal implications. So collectively, all these factors we can call it as pratyaniga. So pratyaniga means that factor that resists manifestation of a disease. So collectively, all these terms come under the term pratyaniga as per Ayurveda. Again, these factors we can classify into three. One is non-modifiable factors. For example, the prakriti or the body constitution that we were born with, we cannot modify that later on because that has already been done. So these are non-modifiable factors. Then we can consider modifiable factors. For example, this dosha, dhatu, agni, the metabolic functions, the mental factors, we can modify these things based on our diet preferences, counselings and other psychological measures. So we can modify all these factors. Then there are partially modifiable factors like desha and kala. For example, an individual is living in a particular habitat where he goes on getting recurrent infections. Then we can ask the person to move to a different country or a different habitat. So they are partially modifiable. Even seasons we can partially modify with artificial what you call climatic control and all those things. So they are something that we considered as partially modifiable factors. So let us discuss about the non-modifiable factors first. So one of the important non-modifiable factor is prakriti. And again, this concept of prakriti is a very important tenet in Ayurveda. And modern medicine is slowly coming back to this concept of what we call genetics and how people with different genetic workup or genotypes, they respond in a different way to different pharmacology and therapies. So that is why a new avenue has come up in modern medicine called as pharmacogenomics, where they have started studying on how the same medicine, for example, you take paracetamol or aspirin, they behave differently in individuals with different genotypes. So prakriti is a phenotype that represents different genotypes. So that prakriti can be considered as a set of physical and psychological attributes pertaining to specific genotypes. So we all are human beings, that is true, and we always share some genetic makeup. But there are some subtle what you call genetic variations among us because we behave differently to different external stimuli. So that is what is called as prakriti. And these prakriti are again classified based on the dosha predominance. Like some individuals are vada predominant prakriti, some individuals are kapha predominant prakriti, some individuals are pitta predominant, and some have different permutations and combinations like vada pitta prakriti, pitta kapha prakriti, like that. So these are classified again based on their expressions of dosha symptomatology, and they are again classified into different prakritis. And the how a prakriti is decided at the time of birth. So there are various factors that influence the formation of prakriti. The important one is the bija or the ovum or the sperm. So the quality of the sperm uh, uh, defines what prakriti a person becomes. And second thing is the kshetra or where the fetus evolves. So obviously it is the mother, the body of the mother. So what is the dosha status of the mother's body at the time of conception as well as during the development phase of the fetus? And dhatu status or the energy levels or the stamina of the mother, all those things have implications. The dietary habits of the mother, even what mother goes through, the mental stages that the mother goes through. Again, this is very important. Then the desha or the geographical or the habitat in which the fetus is conceived inside the mother's womb. That is again that decides what prakriti the individual will become. And the kala or the seasonal influences. So it's a collective thing. All these factors collectively decide whether you will become a vada predominant prakriti or you will become a kapha predominant prakriti. So these factors collectively decide how a prakriti is. And regarding the immune mechanisms in different prakritis, usually it is told in the textbooks that individuals with the vada predominant prakriti, they have poor disease resistance or they tend to get more diseases. And individuals with the kapha predominant prakriti, they have more disease resistance. So that is a concept of prakriti with regards to the immunity that we have to keep in mind. Even during this vaccination process, we did a small study in our institute where all the people who have been vaccinated, we did a small survey. So few people tend to get fever and all those complications of vaccinations. So we studied this with regards to Prakriti, and surprisingly, we found out that individuals with the Pitta and Kapha predominant Prakriti, they get more problems with vaccine. So they tend to get more what you call fever, uh, tiredness, weakness, and all those stuff. They got more compared to other Prakritis. So this study is not published because this is still in an analysis phase. So we are still analyzing that. So even in that response to the vaccine, the Prakriti is a determinant factor. So Prakriti has a role in what do you call how we respond to even infections and even vaccines. And if you go through modern studies, even they have found out this link, which we in Ayurveda we expounded some 2000 years back. Now they say that human genetic variants and age are the strongest predictors of humoral immune responses to common pathogens and vaccines. So this is being validated now. This concept of Prakriti is being validated by modern studies. So those who are interested, you can go through this study, which says that there is a variation among different genetic makeups to vaccines and other immune responses. Again, this is another study that says genetic control of immune response and susceptibility to infectious diseases. So in Ayurveda also we have several studies. Because of the lack of time, I'm not quoting that here, but I think you can go through this later on. And even in disease predisposition, Prakriti has a role. For example, if a Vata Prakriti individual is exposed to Vata predominant etiologies, so that all those causative factors that increases Vata dosha in the body, then they tend to get more severe Vata predominant manifestations. But if you take a Kapha Prakriti individual and they get exposed to Vata predominant etiology, then they tend to get less severe Vata manifestations. You take again Vata Prakriti itself. If a Vata Prakriti individual is exposed to a Kapha etiology, that means causative factors that tends to cause Kapha predominant diseases, then they tend to get less severe Kapha predominant manifestation. So Prakriti can also decide how predisposed you are to certain kind of diseases. So that is again another role that Prakriti has in our response to diseases. And Prakriti also has a role in deciding how severe or what type of clinical manifestations you will get when you are exposed to a particular pathogen. For example, I will give you an example. When there was a chikungunya outbreak in Kerala, chikungunya virus which produced fever and other manifestations. So when we studied individuals, we found out that individuals with the pitta predominant prakritis, they had several hemorrhagic manifestations, and individuals with the vata predominant prakriti, they had joint predominant manifestations. But the vector or the virus, not the vector, I mean the organism that caused the disease is chikungunya virus. It was same in the public, but the disease manifestations they varied between different prakritis. So that is where even prakriti has a role in what all symptomatology you will get when you get infected with the same disease causing pathogen. So that is why prakriti can have a role in different deciding the disease phenotype as well. And even in disease prognosis as well, prakriti has a very important role. And next, apart from the prakriti, the body habitus is also having a role in our response to disease. For example, if the individuals have congenital hereditary abnormalities like Marfan syndrome, Down syndrome, etc., these individuals have poor immune responses. And even in some other acquired, what do you call, body habitus like obesity, underweight, they also tend to have poor response to disease. They have poor resistance to disease. Again, this is told in our ancient Ayurvedic classics. Next is the age. This is again another non-modifiable factor because age we cannot modify. We age when if we take birth, we go through that aging. So depending upon the age also, we have an varying immune response, so that the immune response is very less in the infancy. Obviously, we are protected by the antibodies from our mother. Then if we go through the middle ages, again the immune function is in the optimal stage, and when we age, then the immune response also tend to get less. So this again is evident in the current COVID pandemic as well, because if we go through the vulnerable population, we know that the middle age group, they are less vulnerable to all these COVID manifestations and complications. So age also has a, and this is told in Ayurveda as well, that age is an important determinant in our immune response. So that is regarding the non-modifiable factors. And next is the modifiable factors. Hope I have some 10 to 15 more minutes left with me for to speak. So I'll finish as soon as possible. So modifiable factors, again, as we told, these are the modifiable factors as per Ayurveda. The dosha status of the individual, the Agni, the functioning of the Agni or metabolic functions in the body, the dhatu or the what you call the structural components of the body, and the mala or the what you call the excreta, whether the excretions are happening properly or not, and obviously the very important manas or the mind, the role of mind. So when all these factors are functioning in an optimal stage, then the body will have an optimal immune response and there will be health. Let us take individual ones. So the dosha, again, we told that there are three doshas, vada, pitta, and kapha. The kapha forms the structural and other functional components of the immunity, and vada and pitta act as regulators. So the kapha, if it is considered as a big wheel, then these vada and pitta are the gears, or they regulate this immune response. So whenever there is a balance of dosha in the body, then the immunity also will be in the balance. And if this balance is somehow disturbed due to diet or other lifestyle factors, then the body is what you call susceptible to infections. So again, regarding the dhadus, I have already explained that ojas is the essence of the all seven dhadus. And when the ojas is optimal, then the immunity is optimal. And the excellence or the optimal stage of ojas is indispensable for a proper immune function. And whenever this ojas is disturbed due to some dietary factors or external infections or even mental factors can disturb the ojas, and this lead to immune dysfunctions and disorders of immunity. So the another important one is the bowel connection. So if you go through modern studies now, all these modern studies are directed against the functioning of the gut or the gut microbiome. Ayurvedic sages centuries back, they have identified the importance of diet. For example, if you consult an Ayurvedic doctor, the most important thing that he will be prescribing you is a personalized diet for you, because the gut is so important. Even we know that Hippocrates has told that you are what you eat. So we are what we eat. So all these diseases that we are what you call exposed to comes from our diet or our irregular dietary habits. So Agni, the concept of Agni is nothing but the concept of digestion, metabolism, and assimilation. So whenever there is any abnormality in any of these three mechanisms, then we Ayurvedic doctor, we say that there is some dysfunction in your Agni. And if you uh, persist with your irregular dietary habits, then you are going to be susceptible for diseases. So impaired Agni will lead to formation of something called as ama. This ama is nothing but toxic metabolites, which are partially digested things that we say in Ayurveda. And this ama, whenever is formed in the body, it can lead to different diseases like autoimmune mechanisms, infections, or even aberrant immune response to infections. And if we go through the modern studies, it's very interesting that have now started studying on acute and chronic gut inflammation, even though it is in subtle level, and also the role of gut-associated lymphoid tissue or GALT in maintaining the host health. So this Ayurvedic theory of AMA and this will be something that is similar to all these studies that are now going on regarding the gut microbiome and immunity. So there are a lot of studies going on. So the role of gut microbiota in immune homeostasis and autoimmunity, and even interaction between the gut microbiota and immunity in health and disease. Even in the COVID pandemic now, recently when I went through the literature search, a lot of studies, they say that there is some role for this gut microbiome and how the individual responds to this COVID-19 virus. So the immune response to this what you call COVID-19 virus is different in different individuals because of the difference in the gut microbiome that the individual has. So that is why this age-old theory of Ayurveda regarding the importance of gut modulation is very important even in the current era. So these are some of the important factors that modulate these dosha, dhatu, and agni. And why we have to learn this? We need to learn this because these modifiable factors are very important as far as uh, um, uh, modulating an immune response of an individual is concerned. So age, dietary factors, lifestyle, psychological factors, therapeutic interventions, as well as extrinsic factors like habitat and seasons can have influence on all these factors. So that is where the role of diet will come into play. So long-term dietary preferences of an individual will have long-term effects on the dosha status, dhatu status, and agni of an individual. So what are the long-term dietary preferences of an individual? That will decide how your gut microbiome is going to act, whether it is going to act optimally or whether it is going to act in a very bad way, so that your body is predisposed to infections, diabetes, coronary artery disease, malignancies, arthritis. Lot of things are decided by this long-term dietary preferences. That is why Ayurveda always advocates personalized diet. Even Ayurveda is not saying that there is a model diet and every individual should go through this model diet. It's not like that. We might have heard about this Mediterranean diet or keto diet. A lot of dietary programs are going on. But my humble opinion is that these are not generic things. Every individual cannot go and start having these diets without personalizing that. So the diet has to be personalized based on the body makeup, that is the prakriti of the individual, the dosha status of the individual, the dhatu status, the state of agni or metabolism in the individual, the desha or the habitat from which the person comes. For example, if a person from Austria or Germany comes to Kerala and asks for dietary preferences, then obviously a physician has to consider the habitat from which that individual is coming. Then he has to draw a diet plan for that individual. So that is very important. Then age and seasons also. These are also very important. So that is where the modern studies are also vouching for the role of diet and immunity. For example, they say that various micronutrients and macronutrients and even the interaction between the gut microbiome have a role in modulating the immunity. So that is why new theories, they suggest that we can modulate the immunity based on the nutrition that we give to an individual. Another important and unique concept in Ayurveda is the concept of Viruddha or food combinations. I think modern science have slowly started looking upon into the role of various food combinations. But in Ayurveda, we have been practicing this concept of Viruddha, where typical food combinations that are not healthy. For example, you take milk with fruit, that is not ideal as per Ayurveda. And we have been saying that to patients for the several years that certain foods combinations are not ideal for individuals. So it can be incompatible for the prakriti. For example, you take hot food items for a pitta prakriti individual. So if you are interested, you can go through a study that says that blueberries are not good with milk. So even modern researchers now, they have come to identify that fruits are not good with milk. Then cooking types, for example, deep frying in oil, Ayurveda never vouches for that. So if you go through these dietary patterns for a long period, then your immunity is going to be affected in a very severe way. So you are exposed to autoimmune disorders or even malignancies. Then seasonal implications. For example, you take a lot of spicy foods in a summer season, then that is not good for your body. So like that, there are a lot of, I don't have enough time to speak on that, but this concept of Viruddha is very important as far as Ayurvedic fundamental principles are concerned. So in modern, there is a new branch that is coming up called as trophology, which studies on food combinations. So maybe after some 5 to 10 years, we have typical diets very personalized for certain individuals. But in Ayurveda, we already have that. Next is the concept of Satmya. Satmya is nothing but something that has become very friendly to our body or homologous to our body. Even though the Satmya can be by default, for example, there are some food substances that are by default very ideal for human intake. And there are some food items that has become homologous to our body by continuous exposure. So this concept of Satmya, why this is important is because whenever the body is being exposed to something that is not friendly to our body, then the body starts responding in a very bad way to that thing. So that is why the concept of Satmya is again very important as far as the concept of immunity is concerned. Next is lifestyle aberrations. For example, the new age lifestyle, the fast pace of life. So we have untimely food intake, improper sleep patterns, withholding of natural urges. Again, this is very unique to Ayurveda. I don't think that any other medical systems in the world say that you should not withhold your natural urges. For example, you withhold urine for prolonged time because you don't have time to go to the restroom, or you withhold the urge for defecation. It should not be done. Recently, we did a study in our college where one of our postgraduate students took up a study regarding coronary artery disease and withholding of defecation, urge for defecation. And they found out in a case control study that individuals who developed coronary artery disease, a lot of them had a habit of withholding the urge for defecation. So such concepts are very unique to Ayurveda. So we say that you should not withhold any natural urges. For example, you feel to cry, then you cry, don't withhold your tears, because a long-term withholding of those urges will give you some, maybe there are some autoimmune mechanism, autonomic nervous system, the involvement of autonomic nervous system is there, that makes you more prone to some of the disorders. So withholding of natural urges and not following the seasonal regimens, or something that we call in Ayurveda as Ridhucharya. So as season changes, we have to change our diet and lifestyle. I don't think any medical system in the world will teach you such a thing. But in Ayurveda, we have a very unique theory of Dinacharya and Ridhucharya, where we say that whenever the season changes, you have to change your activities and your diet pattern, because in different seasons have different demands on your body. Changing seasons will alter different demands on your body, and depending upon the changing demands, you have to change your diet and lifestyle on different seasons. So if you don't follow that Ridhucharya or seasonal regimens, then you are more prone to immunodeficiencies or aberrant immune dysfunctions, and you are again susceptible to diseases. Next is the most important thing, that is mind and immune response. I think all of you will agree the importance of very healthy and happy mind to prevent diseases. So mind has an influence on dosha, on metabolic functions, and even on ojas. And we know these are all interrelated as well, because as I told in the initial part of my lecture, that Ayurveda is a holistic science. Everything in the mind, the soul, the body, everything works harmoniously in your body. So the concept of mind is again very important. And this mind connection has been validated by modern studies, especially the theories and studies in the psychoneuroimmunology branch, and even the studies on the chronic stress and anxiety levels on immunity. So you can see this graph where initially there is no much role, but a chronic stress can reduce your immune response. So this again is very important. So a healthy mind in a healthy body is very important. So that is why a lot of studies, the mind connection has been told. So psychological well-being could improve the human immune response. So this is again very important, and this is expounded by Ayurveda as well. And then there are partially modifiable factors, like extrinsic factors like desha or the habitat. So immunity varies between different regions. So if you take even the current COVID pandemic, you know that if you compare the data between India and a country like US, you might have seen that the death rate is very high in the US. Maybe there may be some deficiencies in the data collection in India and in the other countries. But one underlying factor is that in India, people are more exposed to pathogens rather than in Western countries. This we have seen. So especially in states like Tamil Nadu and all, we have seen that the infection rate or even the complication rate has been very less because people are more exposed to pathogens. So the immunity is always on the, what you call, alert stage, so that they can, fight this infection very well. So there are always regional variations, and also when the body interact with the environment more and more, then the immune function also is tuned properly for that exposure. Then there are climatic factors as well, because the seasonal variations can have effect on the dosha as well as the Agni function in the body. So there is a branch known as ecological immunology, which studies the immune responses based on the the habitat and geographical patterns that are exposed to by the individuals. So this again is very important. Then the seasonal variations are also studied extensively, so that a lot of studies say that there are different gene expressions in different seasons, so that the immune response also can vary between that. So how Ayurveda try to manage these what you call factors that can be modified. So the etiology is, in short, we can say that immune dysfunctions, an aberrant immune response can happen either due to your prakriti or your genetic makeup, or due to the abnormal dietary factors that you are exposed to for a prolonged time. I'm not saying that a short-term dietary change can affect your immunity, but a long-term aberrant dietary habits can always have a deleterious effect on your immunity. So an incompatible diet or atypical food combinations, or food combinations that are not healthy to our body, and irregular meal timings, all these things can have a deleterious effect on your immune mechanism. And improper lifestyle activities like uh, improper sleep patterns, withholding of natural urges, psychological factors, and extrinsic causes like habitat, infections, even iatrogenic, improper administration of the drugs can also cause immune change in the immune mechanisms. So this is always a multifactorial etiology, so that when so many factors come into play together, then your immunity starts behaving abnormally. So the therapeutic measures are either preventive, where we go for a personalized diet and lifestyle. Again, I am saying personalized because we cannot say a generic diet that this diet is good for everyone. That's not like that. If you go to an Ayurvedic doctor, the Ayurvedic doctor will assess your prakriti, your dosha status, your metabolic status or Agni, your mind, the season in which you are there, the place where you took birth, and the place you are residing currently. So a lot of what you call uh, factors will be taken into consideration before giving you a diet pattern. And then we will prescribe Ridhucharya or seasonal regimens, where depending upon the changing seasons, what all changes that you have to make for your diet and lifestyle. Regarding management, we have these therapeutic measures called as Shodhana or purificatory therapies. It is called as Panchakarma, or 5 purificatory therapies, which include therapeutic emesis, or we induce emesis, therapeutic purgation, then therapeutic enemas, then bloodletting, and even nasal instillation of medicines. So these are collectively called as Panchakarma or 5 purificatory therapies. Then there are gut modulation therapies. For example, we typically keep a individual on a milk diet for a period of 21 days, 30 days, like that. So it is something like that we do to reset the gut microbiome. So gut modulation therapies are there in Ayurveda. Then there are Rasayana measures that I am going to speak next, rejuvenating medications. Then we also have or offer psychological support in terms of Ayurvedic psychotherapy and meditation techniques. So this is the therapeutic approach for immune dysfunctions in Ayurveda. Rasayana, again, I would like to end my talk on this Rasayana because it's very unique to the branch of Ayurveda. And it is aimed at rejuvenation and immunomodulation. We can use single herb medicines or polyherbal formulations for the purpose of Rasayana. Then Rasayanas are administered either in a controlled environment where we bring the patient into a particular therapeutic setup where the person has to reside for a period of 1 month, 6 months, etc. And we give medicines in a regulated environment, or we have some Rasayana medicines that can be taken as a over-the-counter medications. So over-the-counter pills. So in such way also we can administer Rasayana. So if you personally ask me, I am taking a drug known as Ashwagandha, Withania somnifera, for the last 9 months as this COVID-19 erupted. And until now, despite repeated tests, I have not tested positive, even though I am exposed to patients on a regular basis. So I'm not claiming that it is due to Ashwagandha, because as a scientific man, we need studies to validate that. But a lot of our Ayurvedic doctors, we are taking this drug, and we didn't find any much problem with that. So like that, we have single herb as well as polyherb formulations. So this Rasayana branch of medicine is very unique to Ayurveda, and I think it will be very important on a global stage as well, because if we do a lot of studies on this, then this wonderful branch of medicine can be of help for the world population as well. So if someone wants to go through what Rasayana is, that they can go through this article on concept of and practice on immunomodulation and Rasayana in Ayurveda. So they can go through this. And to end with my talk, I would just like to talk 2 minutes regarding the Kottakkal where I work, because this Kottakkal brand of Ayurveda is very unique in India, because this Kottakkal has a legacy of a great visionary and Vaidya or doctor that we call Vaidyaratnam P.S. Vaidya. He was a very honored and what do you call, a highly regarded Ayurvedic physician in the ancient times, and he initiated the movement of this Kottakkal Ayurveda, and he has started this Ayurveda college around 102 years back. So this Ayurveda college has more than 100 years of excellence in Ayurvedic education and patient care. So this is situated in the town named Kottakkal in Kerala in India. And we also have a very elaborate hospital complex where even we get patients from abroad, from Germany, Italy, and all. We get patients, and we give treatments for lifestyle disorders, even malignancies. We have treatment, autoimmune disorders, neurogenic, what do you call, neurological diseases. A lot of things where modern medicine doesn't have much say. We have treatments, and we do this treatment. We also have undergraduate and postgraduate courses on Ayurveda in here, and even we have courses intended at what do you call, foreigners or people from abroad. They can come here and study about Ayurveda. So for that, we have a separate wing known as Kottakkal Ayurveda School of Excellence, where we provide continual medical education and even Ayurvedic awareness courses and certificate courses for individuals inside and from abroad. Um, so that is regarding my small presentation on Ayurvedic determinants of optimal immune response. So with this mantra from our Vedas, Sarve Bhavantu Suginaha, Sarve Santu Niramayaha. May everyone be happy and may everyone be free from illness. And I once again thank the organizers for providing me, for inviting me for this talk. And I thank all of you for your patient listening as well. Thank you once again.
Thanks a lot. That was great. It was very compact and full of information. So everybody will have to go back and rewind and listen 2 or 3 times to get all the information, which is good. We have maybe one thing you talked a lot about the importance of your diet, your food. So, and also you explained, of course, there is no one way which is the right way. So now, how would you, I mean, obviously, if there is a possibility, you would go to an Ayurvedic doctor to give you the right kind of diet based on your constitution and on your body built up and everything. So that we understand. So what would you say is possible for someone who is maybe far away from any kind of Ayurvedic, medicine or any kind of knowledge of that kind? So how would anybody go about that? I mean, you gave us some basic instructions of what is probably better and whatnot. But would you say it's just you're lost in no man's land when there is no Ayurvedic doctor around, or what would you say?
No, the thing is that there are regional preferences among diet. For example, if you go to a European country and if you come back to Kerala,
Right.
so in India we have a lot of rice. The staple diet itself is rice. But if you go through a European country, then the staple diet is wheat, maybe, or maybe some other grains. And there are some population who eat meat as a predominant diet. And there are people who don't eat meat as well. So there is a totally new movement called as a vegan movement. It's not new something, but nowadays they are catching up a lot. So vegans are there, right? So the thing is that suppose I'll give an example. One European fellow, he until the age of 30 was exposed to meat and bread and all those diet, which is very particular of that European diet. And suddenly he starts switching on to a vegan diet. That's not ideal actually, because I used the term satmya there. Satmya means something that has been made homologous to our body. And suddenly what you are doing, you are switching on to something that is very new to your body. And you are through your middle age, so that you have attained some 30 or 40 years of age. So that is not at all ideal for him. So he has to stick on to that something that he has been brought up with, but maybe with some minimal changes, where he may change the cooking habits. Suppose he has a habit of frying that in an oil, maybe he's stop doing that, and you cook it in some steam or something like that. So there are a lot of things that has to be put into this. Why I am saying is that because when I went to the US, I found that they have a habit of heating the oil, then they'll put that meat onto that, then they'll stir fry that and they will eat that. And what I saw is that there is not a single family where there is no cancer. Every other family, they have malignancy in them. Only thing is that they detect it early, so they treat it better way, apart from other countries. But there is malignancy in every household. So how come they get that? Because in Ayurveda, we say that what we put into our body, the same thing, the same change that we, what you call, happen in the body. So you put lot of meat into your body, that to fried, then obviously there will be some growth that is happening in your body, right? So what I feel is that if that individual belongs to a particular country, then we have to take in first consideration what is their staple diet and what sort of diet for generations they have, because their genes are being modified to that. Suppose a European comes to India and they start eating more rice, then definitely that fellow is going to become obese, because that body is not genetically made up for eating this much rice. So, so that genetic makeup, the region from that individual comes. So basically, if I want to say is that food timing is very important. Then that optimal balance between vegetables, meat, and that carbohydrates, all those things that we have to maintain. Cooking methods are very important. Even we have a habit of storing that in a refrigerator. You take it and heat it in a microwave oven and you take it. It's very bad for health actually. But we continuously do it for a prolonged time. Once in a while you do that, it's okay for you. Again, canned foods, tinned foods. So these are not ideal because human being is not made genetically. Uh, Maybe right from Neanderthal man, if you take the history, we are not made to eat things like that. That is why the term junk food itself came into existence, because we eat junk.
Right, right. So that's great. So basically, what you're saying is what we all have to say to so many people is most of the people are doing so many things wrong that there are so many steps you can take towards a betterment of your lifestyle, and usually once you do that, you will come to a place where you find the people who can give you even further going advice. So first you start out with slow movements,
basic things, basic
right,
things.
right. So that was very important to
I can add on to one of my explanations, because for example, we get a lot of autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, right? Joint disorders. So here what we do is that sometimes we may not give medicines at all. We just give them diet and we ask them to go and practice this diet for some 3 months like that. Then without any disease modifying anti-rheumatic drugs, the patient will come and report that, okay, my pain has come down, my ESR has come down. See, so it's a what do you call, you need patience, because changing the diet and expecting result within a short period of time, that's not an answer, because it will take time. It's not like you gulp a pill and you get any relief immediately. That's not like that.
right.
So this gut modulation, it takes time. That is another important thing that I want to highlight.
So, and would you say, because I have seen some reports on the possibility of the overusage of antibiotics
Yeah,
and the destruction of the gut
gut microbiome. Yeah,
uh, all the stuff and the implications that it has on the whole COVID situation, that those countries with very high antibiotic
antibiotic.
usage are very prone to death and infections of this kind. And those countries we see that have not such a high level Western medicine to use that high amounts of antibiotics, they seem to have lower death rates.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
do you have any kind of research on that? Or, I mean, what's your idea on that?
Yeah, actually, we the problem in here is that if at all if we want to go for a case control study, this antibiotic usage is not properly recorded, especially in a country like India. Even an antibiotics are available all over the counter. You go to any medical shop, you ask, yeah, that fellow who is dispensing the medicines, he even will give you a prescription and he will give you medicines. So it's very difficult to study in a country like India. But if you take that general consensus, I think antibiotic overuse is not only important in COVID-19 but in other diseases as well, because once you take antibiotics, you are literally killing the even the normal microbiome. So abuse of antibiotics is very important thing. I think modern doctors, they are also becoming more and more aware now. So even in India, I have found out that my brother himself is a modern doctor. So I know that what they do. Even they are very aware of prescribing antibiotics nowadays, because now they came to know. Even this multiple drug resistant bacteria have now started evolving because they are using antibiotics irrationally. So I think it's a very valid point that you made.
Right, right.
And again,
Okay,
there are people who use probiotics.
right.
There is a lot of movement going on regarding these probiotics, but I have my what do you call reservations regarding that as well, because even we cannot use probiotics irrationally.
Right, right. Yeah, you're just kind of messing with your system in some way anyway, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
and one more thing that just was going on in my mind while you were talking about the kind of medicine that is given to different people with different prakriti and the kind of effects it has, even if we take aspirin or something very usual, as we call it.
yeah.
Um, so would you say, this is a very personal interest, would you say there is a certain dosha that is preferred by Western medicine? Is there something where you could build up a formula to say, basically it's made for a certain type of build-up in the Western medicine, and when we know what your doshas are, or how they work, we should go for that kind of medication or something.
So that is a very important and valid point you made. So I think we need studies on that, because we usually conduct studies on Ayurvedic medicines and different pragritis. I'll give an example. Suppose A, B, C, three individuals came with a gastric ulcer, and all these three have been confirmed of having gastric ulcer by endoscopy, by gastroscopy. And if that individual comes to an Ayurvedic doctor, the first thing that the doctor will do is a symptom analysis. So the patient A told you that he has pain predominant presentation, and the person B told you that I have burning sensation predominant presentation. I don't have pain, but I have this
Mm,
burning epigastrium.
mm,
And the third individual told you that I don't have pain, I don't have burning, but I have loss of appetite.
yeah.
I don't feel how to take food. Then the medicine will vary. Ayurvedic medicine will vary in all these three individuals. So what I'm saying is that personalization is not only based on prakriti, but even the symptomatology with which the individual comes to you. So this Ayurvedic doctor will prescribe three medicines for all these three, because one had pain, one had burning, and one had loss of appetite.
Right.
So so personalization happens at different levels. So Ayurvedic diagnosis is not about naming a disease, but identifying the therapeutic indicators in the patient. So there are several therapeutic indicators, and one among that is Prakriti. So as you told, maybe I have felt that aspirin is not fit for pitta predominant individuals. So like that, that is my personal observation because I don't have any enough data to back up my data. Maybe some other research if they do, but I think there has to be collaboration between modern medicine and Ayurveda in so many areas. This collaboration should aim at these specific areas as you told, because I think that will be very beneficial for the general population.
Right.
All the differences apart, in my personal opinion, all the medical systems should work for one common cause. That is, Sarve Santu Niramaya. All be healthy. So they have to keep all their differences. Maybe the epistemological differences will be there. The theoretical constructs, the investigatory procedures, everything will be different. But the common thing that all the medical system work for, it's a well-being of the human being. So I think we have to work, and this pharmacogenomics branch is, I think, evolving along with this bioinformatics, because now they are putting all these medications into the system, and they are analyzing what kind of changes that can happen.
Right.
So I think maybe after 10 years, a modern physician will analyze, okay, this is your prakriti, so you don't take paracetamol. Maybe a time will come,
Yeah.
hopefully.
No, this is actually why we have come to the idea of making this knowledge festival, because it's really it really hurts us as human beings that basically all the knowledge is out there, and we just do not get to talk to each other and to find the ways to really use that in that way. And as you said, we are also, the Western medicine is very powerful with all the medications, and they are building all these genetically personalified kind of medication and drugs. So I think, with these kind of talks, and maybe bringing up the cooperation and everything, maybe one day we get to the point where it's just standard way to go about things. But for now, we have these things to do.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank you for your time. You've been very generous with your time, and I think we got plenty to think about. And I think if there is no other questions, which I don't see, then I just thank you, and thank you for your time, and see you soon.
Yeah, see you soon.